Inside the heart of Hitler's most guarded tank factory, 50 steel giants died in total silence, all because of one woman and a piece of metal no larger than a coin. At 5:42 a.m. on October 3, 1943, the gray morning light crept over the Henschel and Sohn factory in Kassel, Germany. Rows of freshly painted Panzer IV and Tiger tanks stood on the assembly floor, their steel hulls glistening under hanging lamps, engines cold, waiting for ignition. According to the shift plan, by 6 o'clock, every engine in Hall 7 should have been running, oil lines pressurized, and the first 20 tanks should have been ready to move toward the railway yard. But that morning, nothing happened. The air was heavy with the smell of machine oil and iron dust, but not a single motor turned. Mechanics ran between machines, shouting over the echoing silence. One by one, foremen climbed into the tanks, turned ignition keys, and pulled the throttles. The engines coughed, clattered, then stalled. The gears refused to engage. Every transmission on the line had locked solid. Sparks flew from overloaded power circuits as operators tried again and again until the foreman in charge of production yelled to shut everything down. Within minutes, the entire factory was filled with shouting voices and the panic of something impossible. From the second-floor observation deck, an officer in a black Panzer uniform stared down at the frozen line of tanks and muttered the word sabotage, though no one dared to agree out loud. The production schedule for the week, 50 units bound for the Eastern Front, was now worthless. Somewhere deep in the heart of that mechanical labyrinth, a single unseen failure had stopped a battalion's worth of armor. Outside the factory gates, a thin woman in a dark coat pedaled away on a rusted bicycle. Her name was Lotte Bower, age 29, a maintenance mechanic assigned to the gearbox section. She had worked the night shift, the one nobody wanted, the one that ended just before dawn. Her bicycle tires hissed softly over the cobblestones, the chill air biting her cheeks. In the small canvas pouch strapped to her handlebars, she carried a half loaf of bread, a wrench, and a short length of chain. Nothing appeared unusual for a factory worker returning home. What nobody in Kassel knew that morning, not the supervisors, the guards, or the officers who would spend weeks interrogating their own men, was that the chain in her bag did not belong to her bicycle. It belonged to history. By midday, telegrams were already leaving the factory for Berlin, describing a catastrophic mechanical failure in all 50 tanks completed during the previous night. The gearboxes had seized simultaneously, making movement impossible. Engineers from the Wehrmacht's technical bureau were ordered to inspect the damage, but they would find nothing that made sense. Every component appeared flawless, and every part met specification, yet the transmissions refused to turn. The officer who wrote the report would later call it the most precise mechanical disaster ever recorded. Lotte was not a soldier, a spy, or even a trained engineer. She was a woman who had once repaired bicycles in her father's shop before the war. But on that gray October morning, her bicycle chain stopped 50 German tanks. In 1943, the Henschel plant was the beating heart of Germany's armored production, with assembly halls stretching for nearly a mile along the Fulda River. Every day, trains brought in shipments of steel plate from Essen, engine blocks from Maybach, and gear assemblies from the Ruhr. Inside, 12,000 men and women labored under the rhythm of machines that never slept. The factory produced 35 tanks a week, each requiring thousands of individual parts, every piece tracked by serial number and inspected by military engineers. Every error or delay meant fewer tanks on the Eastern Front. The entire industrial system of the Reich revolved around this place, and its efficiency was treated as a matter of national survival. For the workers inside, survival meant something different. 1/3 of the workforce were forced laborers, and a growing number of German women were drafted into the war industry. To the guards, they were invisible, but to one another, they were a kind of silent resistance. Lotte's skill with gears and chains had come from her early years. She knew how to feel when a bearing was too tight or when a sprocket had been machined just a fraction off. The man in the factory called her the girl with the quiet hands. She rarely spoke or smiled, but she never made mistakes. Her station was near the final gearbox inspection bench, where units weighing nearly 600 kilograms were tested. Engineers considered the transmission the soul of the tank. Without it, the Panzer was nothing more than 45 tons of dead metal.
Lotte worked 12-hour shifts maintaining those systems, but she noticed everything. She saw the shortcuts taken when supervisors rushed for quotas and began to understand the anatomy of the tank through touch. After witnessing the execution of a worker caught with sabotage tools, she stopped believing the war could be won. She began to watch the guards and machines as an enemy strategist might, looking for weaknesses. She saw how the system's strength depended on absolute obedience. One deviation, one invisible imperfection could unravel the whole structure. Her mind collected details like a camera, memorizing sequences and timings as if preparing for something she hadn't yet decided to do. The sound of tank engines testing in the distance haunted her, reminding her of the towns they would crush, just like the one where her brother had died. The idea began with an irregular click from her bicycle in late February 1944. As she studied a damaged link that had worn unevenly, she realized how one imperfection could lock an entire system. She felt a sudden clarity. If one link can stop a bicycle, why not a tank? The transmissions she serviced relied on flawless synchronization between linked gears. If she could introduce one microscopic imperfection, the system would lock the instant torque was applied. No fire or explosion, just silence. She focused on the coupling chain between the first and second drive gear, the weak point that bore the greatest load. Over the following weeks, she experimented in her maintenance bay, collecting rejected fragments and filing them with the precision of a watchmaker. She tested different alloys until she found a piece of an old bicycle sprocket that was tempered perfectly to resist deformation until stress reached its peak. Her plan was as deliberate as a craftsman building a clock. She would replace the original drive chain link with her modified one. The defect would be invisible but engineered to deform at a precise torque threshold. When the tank's engine engaged under full power, the link would seize, freezing the transmission completely. The risk was absolute, as factory workers had been executed for much less. Fear had long since lost its hold on her after the war took her father and her brother. One night she stayed behind under the pretext of recalibrating a wrench. From her pocket, she removed 6 modified chain links and replaced the original links in 6 gearboxes marked for the Eastern Front. It fit seamlessly, forged to destroy rather than endure. As she walked out, the sirens sounded for the morning shift. For the first time in years, she didn't hear the war, only the steady click of a repaired chain. The final act began on March 12, 1944, under a blacked-out sky. Inside Hall 7, the air was thick with oil and fatigue as the Reich ran out of time. Lotte signed in with 36 modified chain links in her satchel. Between 11 p.m. and 4:30 a.m., she worked her station with mechanical precision. She timed her movements to the rhythm of the hydraulic presses so the sound of clinking metal would be lost in the noise. Every 5th gearbox received a modified link. By 2 a.m., the pouch was nearly empty. She felt detached from her body, each motion rehearsed and inevitable. When a guard passed her workbench, his flashlight sweeping across the open casing, she pretended to tighten bolts. He moved on, and she exhaled. By 3:17 a.m., she had finished 30 units, enough to halt the week's production. She cleaned her station, wiped her fingerprints, and logged each unit as cleared. Dawn broke gray and cold. When the test bay supervisor shouted for ignition at 6:10 a.m., diesel engines roared to life. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then came a sharp metallic crack, followed by a chorus of grinding screams. The entire test line seized. One tank lurched and stalled, another backfired with a deafening explosion. By 6:30, the floor was a mess of smoke and confusion. Dozens of tanks were dead where they stood. Lotte was already miles away, pedaling through the morning mist, the iron dust still on her gloves. She knew the sound of the internal alert meant mechanical failure. At 7:15 a.m., the first telegram left for Berlin. In her small apartment, she felt a quiet sense of balance. Somewhere in the east, a soldier would live because a tank would not move.
For 3 days, the plant operated in a state of disbelief. Engineers called the failure an impossibility. They drained fuel and replaced oil, but the results were the same. Each tank roared for a moment, then screamed and froze. Gestapo officers arrived on the 4th day, and interrogations began. Workers were lined up against the wall, questions were shouted, and a foreman was dragged away. But the investigators found no explosives or chemical residue. The official report described it as a catastrophic manufacturing anomaly. Meanwhile, the Eastern Front demanded more tanks. In Ukraine, entire divisions were retreating, and every day lost in Kassel meant fewer reinforcements. German quartermasters calculated that 50 tanks equaled the loss of an entire battalion. The sabotage, though invisible, had consequences measured in blood. It took days before a junior engineer noticed microscopic scratches on a chain link under a magnifying glass. When tested, the link deformed at exactly 650 Newton meters, the threshold at which the transmission would cease. The production chief, pale with fear, tore the report in half and ordered that no one write about sabotage. The official story remained a manufacturing anomaly, but a quiet terror took root among those who saw the evidence. Someone had broken the machine from within. The suspect they wanted no longer existed. Lotte had vanished 3 days earlier, her bicycle found near the riverbank. Her work card had been stamped medical leave by a foreman who didn't remember signing it. No one ever saw her again. By April, the factory was operational, but the rhythm was broken. Fear had entered the machines. The delay at Kassel reduced output by 14% that quarter. At the front, a German regiment was overrun after its assigned tank battalion failed to arrive. The battle summary listed the cause as mechanical losses at the depot, a technical phrase concealing the truth. The wrecked tanks were eventually melted down. When the Allies reached Kassel in 1945, they found the ruins of the factory under layers of ash. A British engineer noted that multiple gear units appeared to have suffered identical torque seizure, suggesting deliberate design. In the chaos of occupation, nobody cared who had done it. Lotte's apartment had been hit during a raid, leaving nothing but a charred iron bed frame. A soldier found a small tin box in the ruins containing a photograph and a handwritten note that read, "For my brother, so they cannot move anymore." Her name appeared again in a footnote of an obscure academic paper in 1972, the only trace of her existence in the official record. There were no medals or honors, just the faint echo of her name drifting through time. Among surviving workers, she became a myth of quiet defiance called the cyclist, a woman who fought the Reich with nothing but a wrench and courage. Years later, a researcher found an unmarked envelope containing a small chain link stamped as recovered from Kassel in 1944. Tests revealed it had been deliberately modified. The researcher smiled, knowing Lotte knew exactly what she was doing. Today, a single display case in the Kassel Historical Museum contains that chain link with a caption that reads, "One defective link, 50 tanks stopped, thousands spared." The Allied archives recorded every battle and every ton of steel, but history forgot the morning when 50 tanks failed to move. It was enough to save thousands of lives. Lotte Bower's act belonged to the microscopic scale, where human will meets the mechanics of metal. She had made perfection fail, a flaw so subtle it evaded every inspector until it bloomed under the pressure of war. It was a quiet testament to the idea that resistance need not roar to be heard. Wars are built on systems and obedience, but every system depends on the truth that people will keep it running. When one person decides not to, even the strongest machine can be stopped. Lotte did not end the war,
But she reminded the world that even in a world built on steel, humanity still has the power to jam the gears. The sound of a turning bicycle chain remains, rhythmic and steady, fading into the silence of history.